The rain came down like shattered glass, each drop a tiny blade against my skin as I stumbled through the empty streets of Manhattan. My heels had broken 3 blocks ago, leaving me limping on uneven feet, my ruined stockings doing nothing to protect my frozen toes from the icy puddles. November in New York had never felt so cruel, blood mixed with rainwater on my split lip, the metallic taste filling my mouth with each ragged breath. My left eye had already swollen half shut, and I could feel the tender throb of fresh bruises blooming across my ribs where Marcus's boot had connected. Again and again, just keep moving, Elena. Keep moving. The voice in my head sounded distant, weak, nothing like the strong woman I'd once believed myself to be. That woman had died somewhere between the first slap and the 100th apology. Now there was only this broken creature, running through the rain with nowhere to go to, and my phone was gone. Smashed against the wall when I'd tried to call for help. My purse, abandoned somewhere in the apartment I'd fled. All I had were the clothes on my back and the desperate need to survive long enough to see my daughter again, Mia. My beautiful, innocent Mia, safe with Mrs. Patterson in Queens. The elderly neighbor had agreed to watch her while I went back to our old apartment to collect the last of our things. A mistake. Terrible, nearly fatal mistake. I hadn't known Marcus would be waiting. The golden light spilling onto the wet sidewalk caught my attention first. Warm, inviting, a beacon in the darkness that my broken body gravitated toward without conscious thought. Through the rain-streaked windows, I could see white tablecloths and crystal glasses, elegant people enjoying their dinners, oblivious to the suffering just beyond the glass-dot Benedetti's. The name was etched in elegant script above the door. I'd heard of this place, one of Manhattan's most exclusive Italian restaurants where a single meal cost more than my monthly rent. The kind of establishment that would take one look at me and call the police, but my legs had stopped obeying my commands. The world tilted dangerously, the golden light blurring and splitting into fractured beams. I reached for the wall to steady myself, but my fingers found only air. The last thing I registered before the darkness claimed me was the cold, wet concrete rushing up to meet my face, and somewhere distant, the sound of a door opening. Luca Benedetti had built his empire on 3 principles: loyalty, precision, and control. Tonight, as he reviewed the quarterly reports in his private office above the restaurant, all 3 seemed to be in perfect alignment. The Benedetti family's legitimate businesses were thriving, their less legitimate ones even more so, and the city's various power players had finally learned to respect the boundaries he'd established. Mr. Benedetti. Marco's voice crackled through the intercom, tinged with an urgency that immediately set Luca's instincts on high alert. There's a situation at the front entrance. You should come down. Luca set down his pen, straightening his cuffs as he rose from his leather chair. Marco had been with him for 15 years, since they were both young men learning the brutal realities of their world. He didn't use that tone lightly. The restaurant's main floor hummed with the quiet murmur of conversation and the gentle clink of silverware against fine china. Luca moved through the space with the confidence of a man who owned not just the building but the very ground it stood upon. Diners glanced up as he passed, recognizing power even if they didn't recognize the man wielding it. The commotion near the entrance drew his attention immediately. Sophia, his head hostess and a woman who'd practically raised him after his mother's death, was kneeling on the rain-soaked floor just inside the door, cradling something in her arms. Dano. Not something. Someone. She collapsed right outside, Marco explained, his massive frame blocking the view from curious diners. One of the valets saw her fall. Luca pushed past him, and the sight that greeted him stopped him cold. A woman lay crumpled in Sophia's arms, her dark hair plastered to her face, her simple dress torn and soaked through. But it wasn't her bedraggled state that made his blood turn to ice. It was the damage. Even through the rain and the dim lighting of the entryway, he could see the violence written across her body. A split lip, swollen and crusted with blood. One eye nearly swollen shut, the skin around it already deepening to purple. And when Sophia shifted her grip, the woman's sleeve rode up, revealing finger-shaped bruises circling her wrists like a grotesque bracelet. Something ancient and dangerous stirred in Luca's chest. A fury he'd learned to control decades ago, when he'd watched his father beat his mother for the last time. Before Luca had ended it. Everyone out. His voice was quiet, but it carried the weight of absolute authority. The restaurant is closed for the evening. A ripple of surprise moved through the room. Benedetti's had never closed early in its 20-year history. But no one argued. No one ever argued with Luca Benedetti. Mr. Benedetti, the guests, the assistant manager began, will be compensated and personally apologized to. Luca cut him off, his eyes never leaving the unconscious woman. Marco, clear the building. Sophia, take her to the private dining room. And someone call Dr. Ferraro. Now. The next few minutes passed in a blur of controlled chaos. Staff ushered bewildered diners toward the exit, offering profuse apologies and promises of future reservations. Marco's security team swept the building with practiced efficiency. And through it all, Luca watched as Sophia and two other women carefully transferred the stranger to a velvet settee in the private room. "She's burning up," Sophia reported, pressing her hand to the woman's forehead. "Fever? She's been out in this rain for too long." She looked up at Luca, her weathered face creased with concern and something else. Recognition, perhaps, of the look in his eyes. "Luca, who is she?" "I don't know." He moved closer, studying the woman's face beneath the damage. Young, mid-20s perhaps, with delicate features that would be beautiful once the swelling went down. Dark lashes fanned against cheekbones that were too sharp, speaking of meals skipped and sleep lost. "But I intend to find out. Should we call the police?" Luca's jaw tightened. Police would ask questions, file reports, possibly put her name in a system where whoever had done this might find it. In his experience, the men who beat women rarely did so just once. They hunted. They possessed. They destroyed. No police. Not yet. He shrugged off his suit jacket, draping it over her trembling form. The expensive fabric would be ruined, and he couldn't have cared less. "No one leaves this building until I know who did this to her." "And why?" The woman stirred, a soft moan escaping her damaged lips. Her eyes fluttered, fighting to open, and Luca found himself holding his breath. When she finally managed to focus, he found himself staring into eyes the color of warm honey, clouded with pain and fear. Beautiful eyes even now. Especially now, filled with a fierce determination to survive that resonated somewhere deep in his soul. "Where?" she rasped, trying to sit up, only to collapse back with a gasp of pain. "Don't move." Luca kept his voice soft, gentler than he'd spoken to anyone in years. "You're safe. You collapsed outside my restaurant." Those honey eyes widened, darting around the room, searching for threats. When they landed on Marco's imposing figure by the door, real terror flashed across her features. "Please." Her hand shot out, grabbing Luca's wrist with surprising strength. "Please don't send me back to him. I'll do anything. Please." The desperation in her voice, the absolute certainty that she was about to be delivered back to her abuser, told Luca everything he needed to know about the kind of life she'd been living. "No one is sending you anywhere." He covered her hand with his own, feeling the fine tremors running through her body. "What's your name?" She hesitated, wariness replacing some of the panic. Smart. Even half dead, she was calculating risks. He found himself respecting her for it. "Elena," she finally whispered. "Elena Vasquez." Elena. He tested the name, let it roll across his tongue. "I'm Luca Benedetti. And I give you my word, whoever did this to you will never touch you again." She stared at him, her swollen eye making the expression almost comical if it hadn't been so heartbreaking. "You don't even know me." "I know enough." He straightened as the door opened and Dr. Ferraro entered, medical bag in hand. "I know that someone used you as a punching bag. I know that you ran through a freezing rainstorm rather than stay with him. And I know that you're terrified." He held her gaze, letting her see the truth of his next words. "In my world, Elena, men who hurt women don't get second chances. They get buried." Whether it was the fever, the exhaustion, or some instinct telling her she'd finally found safety, Elena's grip on his wrist relaxed. Her eyes fluttered closed again. "Mia," she murmured, the word barely audible. "My daughter. Need to get Mia a daughter." Luca filed that information away, adding it to the growing list of reasons why this woman's abuser would pay dearly. "Where is your daughter, Elena?" he asked urgently, but she had already slipped back into unconsciousness. Doctor Ferraro moved in, gently shooing Luca aside to begin his examination. "She's severely hypothermic, dehydrated, and I can see at least 3 cracked ribs without even doing an X-ray. She needs a hospital. Can you treat her here?" The doctor raised an eyebrow. "Luca, she needs proper care. Can you treat her here?" Luca repeated, his tone brooking no argument. "Whoever did this might be looking for her. Hospitals have records. Records can be accessed." Dr. Ferraro sighed, the resignation of a man who had long ago accepted the unusual demands of being the Benedetti family's personal physician. "I'll need to bring in some equipment. And a nurse I trust. It'll take a few hours to stabilize her properly. Whatever you need. The money is not an issue." As the doctor began his work, Luca stepped back, pulling Marco aside. "Find out everything you can about Elena Vasquez. Where she lives, where she works, who she knows. And Marco," his voice dropped to a register that made even his most trusted lieutenant tense, "find out who did this to her. And when I do..." Luca watched Sophia carefully clean the blood from Elena's face, watched the doctor's hands move with practiced precision over her broken body. He thought about the daughter out there somewhere, waiting for a mother who might not have survived the night if she'd collapsed 1 block earlier or later. "When you do," Luca said quietly, "we have a conversation." A very long conversation. Marco nodded and disappeared into the night, alone now except for the doctor and Sophia. Luca pulled a chair close to the settee and sat down. He should leave, let the professionals do their work, return to the reports waiting in his office. There were 1,000 things that demanded his attention. Instead, he stayed. He told himself it was strategic. The woman clearly knew something, was running from someone. Information was power, and Luca hadn't built his empire by ignoring potentially valuable assets that literally fell at his doorstep. But as the night wore on, as Elena's fever raged and her body fought against the damage inflicted upon it, Luca found himself reaching for her hand. Just to check her temperature. Just to make sure she was still breathing. "She's strong," Sophia observed quietly, settling into a chair on the other side of the room. "To survive what was done to her, to run instead of surrender. She's a fighter." "She shouldn't have to be," Luca replied, his thumb unconsciously tracing circles on the back of Elena's hand. "No woman should have to fight like this." Sophia studied him with the knowing eyes of a woman who'd watched him grow from an angry boy into a dangerous man. "You're thinking of your mother." Luca didn't answer. He didn't need to. The rain continued to fall outside, washing the city clean of its sins. Inside Benedetti's, surrounded by the empty elegance of a restaurant closed for the first time in 2 decades, Luca Benedetti kept vigil over a stranger. He didn't know yet that she would change everything. He didn't know that the man who'd beaten her was already searching, already planning, already making calls to find the woman who dared to run. He didn't know that the daughter Elena had mentioned was the key to unlocking secrets that would shake the very foundations of his carefully controlled world. All he knew in that moment was that something had shifted. Some invisible line had been crossed. And there was no going back. Outside, the storm raged on. But inside, in the warm golden light of a restaurant that had seen its share of shadows, a new story was beginning. I woke to the scent of lavender and clean linen, so foreign after months of Marcus's cigarette smoke and stale beer that for a moment I thought I was dreaming. The mattress beneath me was impossibly soft, nothing like the lumpy couch I'd been sleeping on since moving in with Mrs. Patterson. Then the pain hit. Every breath sent fire through my ribs. My face throbbed with a dull, persistent ache, and when I tried to open my eyes fully, the left one refused to cooperate. Memories crashed over me like waves. Marcus's fist. The rain. Running. Falling golden light. A man's voice, deep and certain. No one is sending you anywhere. My eyes flew open, panic surging through my battered body. I tried to sit up, gasped at the explosion of pain in my midsection, and fell back against pillows that smelled of expensive detergent. Easy. A woman's voice, warm and accented. You'll tear your stitches. I turned my head, finding an elderly woman with silver hair and kind eyes watching me from a chair beside the bed. She wore a simple black dress, elegant in its simplicity, and held a cup of something steaming in her weathered hands. Where am I? My voice came out as a croak, my throat raw and dry. Safe. She set down the cup and reached for a glass of water on the nightstand. Drink slowly. You've been asleep for almost 18 hours. 18 hours. The number hit me like a physical blow. Mia. I grabbed the woman's wrist, ignoring the pain that shot through my arm. My daughter. I have to, your daughter is fine. The woman's other hand covered mine, gentle but firm. Mr. Benedetti's people located her last night. She's been brought here safe and sound. She's downstairs right now, eating pancakes with Rosa and asking when her mommy will wake up. The relief was so intense it brought tears to my eyes. Mia was here. Mia was safe. I hadn't failed her. How? I managed, my voice breaking. How did he find her? The woman's expression softened with something like admiration. Mr. Benedetti is a man of considerable resources. When you mentioned your daughter's name in your fever, he made finding her his priority. She helped me take a sip of water. Mrs. Patterson was quite worried about you. She's been calling the police, filing missing person reports. Mr. Benedetti's people explained you'd had an accident and were being cared for. The poor woman was so relieved she cried. I processed this information slowly, my foggy brain struggling to keep up. A stranger had found my daughter, brought her to safety, and somehow smoothed things over with Mrs. Patterson. All while I lay unconscious. Why? Question escaped before I could stop it. Why would he do all this for someone he doesn't even know? The woman smiled, a knowing expression that suggested she understood far more than she was saying. That is a question for Mr. Benedetti himself. I am Sophia, by the way. I've worked for the Benedetti family for over 30 years. She stood, smoothing her dress. Are you feeling strong enough for a visitor? There's a little girl who's been asking about you every 5 minutes. My heart clenched. Yes. Please. I need to see her. Sophia nodded and moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. Elena, I've seen many people pass through Mr. Benedetti's life. I've learned to read them quickly. Her dark eyes held mine. You have nothing to fear here. Whatever you're running from, whoever hurt you, they cannot reach you within these walls. I hope you can believe that. Before I could respond, she was gone. I used the moment alone to take stock of my surroundings. The room was large and beautifully appointed, with high ceilings, cream-colored walls, and furniture that probably cost more than everything I'd ever owned combined. Gauzy curtains filtered pale morning light, and through the window I could see manicured grounds stretching toward a distant tree line. This wasn't a hospital. This wasn't even a normal house. This was a mansion. The kind of place I'd only seen in magazines, the kind of life I'd never imagined touching mine. The door burst open and a small blonde missile launched herself onto the bed. Mommy. The impact sent pain radiating through my ribs, but I didn't care. I wrapped my arms around my daughter and held on like she was the only solid thing in a world that had gone completely mad. Baby. I breathed in the scent of her strawberry shampoo, felt her small heart beating against my chest. Oh, my sweet girl. Mommy, your face looks owy. Mia pulled back, her blue eyes wide with concern as she studied my bruises. Did you fall down? The innocent question nearly broke me. How many times had I used that excuse? How many times had I lied to protect her from the truth of what Marcus was doing to me? Yes, baby. Mommy fell down. But I'm okay now. I smoothed her tangled curls, noting that someone had dressed her in clothes I didn't recognize. Expensive clothes, soft and clearly new. Have you been a good girl? Mia nodded enthusiastically. Rosa made me pancakes with chocolate chips, and there's a really big garden, and I saw a fountain with fish in it, and Mr. Luca let me sit in his big chair, and… Mr. Luca? My stomach tightened. The man from last night. The one with eyes like blue ice and a voice that promised violence to those who'd hurt me. My daughter had been spending time with him? He's nice, Mommy. Mia said it with the simple certainty of a child. He doesn't smile a lot, but his eyes smile. And he said he would keep us safe from the bad men. Before I could respond, a soft knock came at the door. Mia scrambled off the bed and ran to open it. Her fear of strangers apparently evaporated overnight. Mr. Luca. Mommy's awake. He filled the doorway, even more imposing in the daylight than he'd been in my fever-hazed memories. Tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a charcoal suit that probably cost more than my annual salary when I'd still had a job. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his jaw clean-shaven, and those eyes, God, those eyes, they swept over me with an intensity that made me want to pull the covers up to my chin. Elena. He said my name like he was testing it, committing it to memory all over again. How are you feeling? Like I was hit by a truck. The words came out harsher than I intended, defensive. Which I suppose is better than how I should feel, given the circumstances. Something flickered in his expression. Amusement? Respect? It was gone too quickly to identify. Dr. Ferraro said you're healing well. 3 cracked ribs, significant bruising, mild hypothermia. You were lucky. He moved into the room, and I noticed he walked with the controlled grace of someone who was always aware of his surroundings. Or perhaps not lucky. Perhaps just strong enough to survive what would have killed a weaker person. Mia had attached herself to his leg, looking up at him with adoration that sent a complicated twist through my chest. My daughter didn't take to strangers. She'd been shy and withdrawn ever since Marcus had entered our lives, flinching at loud noises and sudden movements. Yet here she was, clinging to a man who radiated danger like heat from a furnace. I need to thank you, I said carefully, watching how he interacted with my daughter. His hand came to rest on her head, gentle despite its size, and he ruffled her curls with an ease that surprised me. For everything. Finding Mia, bringing her here, the medical care. I don't know how I'll ever repay you. I don't require repayment. He met my eyes, and I felt pinned in place by the weight of his gaze. I require answers. The shift in his tone made my blood run cold. Here it was. The catch. Nothing in this world came for free, and I'd been foolish to imagine even for a moment that this man's help didn't come with strings attached. Mia. Luca looked down at my daughter with an expression far softer than the one he'd leveled at me. Rosa mentioned something about cookies in the kitchen. Why don't you go help her while I talk to your mother? Okay. Mia bounced toward the door, then paused, running back to give me a careful hug. Feel better, Mommy. Mr. Luca will make the Aukies go away. And then she was gone, leaving me alone with a man who was either my savior or my new captor. I honestly couldn't tell which. Luca pulled a chair close to the bed, sitting down with the easy confidence of someone who owned every room he entered. Which I supposed he probably did. Who is Marcus Webb to you? The name hit me like a slap. My hands clenched in the sheets, knuckles going white. How do you know that name? I know many things. He leaned back, crossing one leg over the other with casual elegance. I know you lived with him for 8 months in an apartment on 47th Street. I know you worked as a waitress at a diner in Queens until 6 weeks ago when you suddenly quit. I know you've been staying with an elderly neighbor, sleeping on her couch, barely eating, trying to keep your daughter safe. His eyes never left mine. What I don't know is why you went back to that apartment last night, and why Marcus Webb felt entitled to use you as his personal punching bag. The clinical recitation of my life's recent disasters made me feel stripped bare, exposed. He'd had people investigating me, learning my secrets. And yet, somehow, I couldn't summon the energy to be angry about it. We were never together, I said quietly. Not really. He was my landlord. I rented a room from him after my last relationship ended, and I had nowhere else to go. I looked down at my hands, shame burning in my chest. It started small. Comments about my appearance, showing up when I was changing. Then he started finding excuses to touch me. And when I tried to set boundaries, I swallowed hard. The first time he hit me, he apologized for an hour afterward. Cried. Promised it would never happen again. But it did. Yes. The word came out as a whisper. It always does. Silence stretched between us. I couldn't look at him, couldn't bear to see the judgment or, worse, the pity in his eyes. Why did you go back last night? Mia's birth certificate. Her immunization records. Things I need to enroll her in school to prove she's mine. My voice cracked. He took everything when I left. Kept it as leverage. Said if I ever wanted those documents back, I knew where to find him. So you walked into a trap to get papers. It wasn't a question. I walked into a trap to give my daughter a future. I finally lifted my eyes to his, finding not judgment but something that looked almost like understanding. I've been trying to rebuild our lives. Find a job, save money, get us somewhere safe. But without those documents, I can't do any of it. Marcus knows that. He's been using it to keep me under his control even from a distance. Luca was quiet for a long moment, his expression unreadable. The documents have been retrieved, he finally said. My people visited Mr. Webb's apartment early this morning. My heart stopped. What? Mia's birth certificate, her immunization records, your social security card, and various other items that I assumed held personal value. He reached into his jacket pocket, producing a slim folder. They're all here. I stared at the folder like it might bite me. How? Marcus would never just hand those over. Mr. Webb was not given a choice. Something dark passed through Luca's eyes. He was, however, given a message. One I'm confident he received quite clearly. The implications of his words settled over me like a cold blanket. I remembered what he'd said last night in my fever-hazed state. In my world, men who hurt women don't get second chances. They get buried. Is he dead? I wasn't sure if I was asking or hoping. No. Luca's jaw tightened. Not yet. Though not for lack of desire on my part. He leaned forward, and I caught a hint of his cologne, something woody and expensive. Elena, I need you to be completely honest with me. Is there anything else Marcus Webb has over you? Any other leverage he might use to find you or hurt you? I thought about it carefully, searching my memory for anything I might have missed. He knows where Mrs. Patterson lives. He knows I don't have family in the city, that I have nowhere else to go. A terrible thought struck me. He knows about Mia's father. Luca's eyebrow raised slightly. And who is Mia's father? No one. I mean, he's not in the picture. Never has been. It was a one-night thing years ago. I don't even know his last name. The old shame resurfaced, but I pushed through it. But Marcus, he threatened to report me to child services. Said he had friends who could make me look like an unfit mother. Take Mia away from me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop several degrees. He threatened your daughter. He threatened everything. The dam broke, and suddenly I was crying, great heaving sobs that sent pain shooting through my ribs. I've been so scared for so long, and I didn't know what to do. I couldn't go to the police because half of them drink at the bar Marcus works at. I couldn't go to a shelter because he knows people who would find me. I couldn't. Warm hands clasped mine, and I looked up to find Luca had moved closer, his blue eyes burning with an intensity that stole my breath. Listen to me carefully, Elena. His voice was low, controlled, but I could hear the steel beneath it. Marcus Webb will never touch you again. He will never touch your daughter. He will never so much as breathe in your direction. Do you understand? Why? Question tore out of me. Why do you care? You don't know me. I'm nobody. I'm just some broken woman who collapsed on your sidewalk. For a long moment, he didn't answer. His thumbs traced small circles on the backs of my hands, a gesture so surprisingly tender it made my chest ache. Because once, a long time ago, there was another woman who needed someone to protect her, he said quietly. And no one did. I won't make that mistake again. He released my hands and stood abruptly, the vulnerable moment passing so quickly I almost thought I'd imagined it. You'll stay here until you've recovered, he said, all business once more. Rosa will look after Mia. Dr. Ferraro will check on you daily. You'll want for nothing. I can't just stay here indefinitely. I need to find a job, an apartment. Those concerns can wait. He moved toward the door. For now, your only job is to heal. Everything else will be addressed in time. He was almost through the door when I called out, Mr. Benedetti. He paused, looking back over his shoulder. Thank you, I said, meaning it more than I'd ever meant anything. For Mia. For the documents. For all of it. Something softened in his expression just for a moment. Luca, he said. Call me Luca. Then he was gone, leaving me alone with my tears and the growing, terrifying suspicion that I had fallen out of one dangerous situation and directly into another. But as I heard Mia's laughter drifting up from somewhere below, bright and carefree in a way I hadn't heard in months, I found I couldn't bring myself to regret it. Whatever Luca Benedetti wanted from me, whatever price I would eventually have to pay, my daughter was safe for now. That was enough. It had to be. 3 days passed in the Benedetti mansion like a fever dream. Each morning I woke expecting the fantasy to shatter, expecting Luca to appear at my door with a bill I couldn't pay or demands I couldn't meet. Instead, I found only Sophia with fresh clothes, Dr. Ferraro with gentle examinations, and Rosa with trays of food that would have fed a small army. My ribs were healing. The swelling around my eye had gone down enough that I could see properly again. The bruises had faded from angry purple to sickly yellow, a rainbow of violence slowly disappearing from my skin, but it was Mia's transformation that truly stunned me. My daughter, who had spent months tiptoeing around Marcus's moods, flinching at raised voices and hiding in corners when strangers appeared, had blossomed. She ran through the mansion's halls with abandon, her laughter echoing off marble floors. She helped Rosa in the kitchen, standing on a step stool to stir cookie batter. She picked flowers in the garden with Sophia, arranging them in tiny vases she placed throughout the house, and every evening, without fail, she dragged Luca Benedetti into the sitting room to read her bedtime stories. I watched from the doorway the first time it happened, my heart in my throat. This man who commanded empires, who had threatened violence with the casual certainty of someone discussing the weather, sat in an oversized armchair with my daughter curled in his lap. His deep voice softened as he read about princesses and dragons, pausing to let Mia turn the pages, answering her endless questions with patience I wouldn't have expected. He's good with her. Sophia appeared beside me, her voice low. Better than he realizes. Does he have children of his own? No. No wife, no children. The Benedetti line ends with him unless he changes his mind. Sophia's eyes held old sadness. He's convinced himself that his world is no place for a family. That anyone he loves becomes a target. I thought about that as I watched Mia yawn against Luca's chest, her small fist clutching his silk tie like a security blanket. What kind of life made a man believe love was a liability? On the 4th morning, I finally felt strong enough to venture downstairs without assistance. I found Luca in his study, a massive room lined with books and dominated by a desk that probably cost more than my lifetime earnings. He looked up as I knocked on the open door, something flickering in his eyes before his expression smoothed into careful neutrality. Elena, you should be resting. I've been resting for 4 days. Any more rest and I'll go insane. I stepped into the room, acutely aware of how out of place I looked in borrowed clothes amid such obvious wealth. I wanted to talk to you. About what happens next. He set down his pen and leaned back in his chair, giving me his full attention. The weight of his gaze still unnerved me, but I was learning to meet it without flinching. Sit. I took one of the leather chairs facing his desk, smoothing the soft fabric of the dress Rosa had laid out for me. Everything in this house was soft, luxurious, a world away from scratchy secondhand clothes and threadbare towels. I can't stay here forever, I began. Why not? The blunt question threw me off balance. Because this isn't my home. 'Cause I need to rebuild my life. Because I have nothing to offer you in return for your hospitality. Lucas studied me for a long moment, his fingers steepled beneath his chin. What if I told you I have a proposition? My stomach clenched. Here it was. The price for his protection, the strings I'd been waiting for. I'd say I'm listening. I need a personal assistant. He delivered the words with the same casual authority he applied to everything. Someone to manage my calendar, handle correspondence, coordinate with my household staff. Sophia has been filling the role informally for years, but she deserves to enjoy her retirement rather than chasing after my schedule. I blinked, certain I'd misheard. A personal assistant. Position comes with a salary, housing, benefits. Mia would have access to the best schools in the city. You would have security, stability, and the resources to build whatever future you want. His eyes held mine. All I ask in return is competence and discretion. It was too good to be true. In my experience, things that seemed too good to be true always were. Why me? You don't know anything about my qualifications. I was a waitress. You were a waitress because circumstances forced you into survival mode. Before that, according to my research, you completed 2 years of business school before dropping out when you became pregnant. He tilted his head slightly. You're intelligent, resourceful, and you've managed to keep your daughter safe and loved despite impossible circumstances. Those qualities matter more to me than a degree. The fact that he'd researched my background so thoroughly should have alarmed me. Instead, I found myself oddly touched that he'd looked beyond the surface. And if I say no, then you're free to leave whenever you wish, with enough money to establish yourself somewhere safe. I won't force you into anything, Elena. I'm offering an opportunity, not issuing a command. I thought about Mia, about the joy in her eyes as she explored this beautiful prison, about the terror that still woke me at night, the certainty that Marcus was out there somewhere, planning his revenge, about the exhausting prospect of starting over again with nothing. Can I think about it? Take all the time you need. He returned his attention to the papers on his desk, a clear dismissal. But Elena, whatever you decide, know that my protection extends to you regardless. Marcus Webb will not touch you or your daughter. That is not conditional on your answer. I rose to leave, pausing at the door. Why does it matter so much to you? Protecting women you don't know from men who hurt them? Lucas' pen stilled. For a moment, I thought he wouldn't answer. When he spoke, his voice was rough with old pain. 'Cause I was 8 years old when I watched my father beat my mother to death. And I swore on her grave that no woman would ever suffer that fate while I had the power to prevent it. Confession hung in the air between us, raw and bleeding. I wanted to say something to offer comfort, but what words could possibly be adequate? I'm sorry, I finally managed. For your mother. For the boy you were. He looked up, and for just a moment I saw past the controlled exterior to the wounded child beneath. Then the walls slammed back into place. Don't be sorry. Be safe. He nodded toward the door. Mia is in the garden. I believe she's attempting to teach Rosa's cat to do tricks. I recognized the dismissal for what it was, a retreat from vulnerability. But as I walked through the mansion toward the sound of my daughter's laughter, I carried his confession with me like a precious, terrible gift. Luca Benedetti was dangerous. That much was obvious. But he was also damaged in ways that resonated with my own broken places, and against every instinct telling me to run, I found myself wanting to stay. That evening, I found Sophia in the kitchen, preparing what she called a simple dinner that would have fed a restaurant full of customers. She looked up as I entered, her weathered face creasing into a warm smile. "Feeling better, Kara?" "Much." I settled onto a stool at the massive island, watching her capable hands chop vegetables with practiced efficiency. "Sophia, can I ask you something?" "Of course." Luca offered me a job. Personal assistant. Her hands stilled momentarily before resuming their work. "And what do you think of this offer?" "I think it's generous." "Too generous." I traced a pattern on the marble countertop. "I think there's something he's not telling me." Sophia was quiet for a long moment, her knife moving rhythmically through a pile of onions. When she spoke, her voice was careful. "Luca is a complicated man. He carries burdens that would crush most people. And yes, there are things about his life, his business, that he keeps hidden." She looked up, her dark eyes serious. "But I have known him since he was a boy. I watched him bury his mother, then watch his father be taken to prison. I watched him build an empire from the ashes of his childhood. And in all that time, I have never seen him hurt an innocent person. But he has hurt people. He has done what was necessary to survive and protect those under his care." Sophia set down her knife. "The world Luca operates in is not kind. Does not reward mercy or weakness. He has made choices that haunt him, choices I wish he hadn't been forced to make. But he is not a monster." I thought about the man who read bedtime stories to my daughter, who had retrieved documents from my abuser without being asked, who had offered me a future without demanding anything in return. What happened to his father? Life in prison. For what he did to Luca's mother. Sophia's expression darkened. Luca testified against him at 14 years old. Stood in that courtroom and described every blow, every scream, every moment of horror he'd witnessed. His father's family disowned him. Called him a traitor. My God. He rebuilt everything from nothing. Created his own family, his own empire, his own code of honor. Sophia reached across the counter to squeeze my hand. "You asked what he's not telling you. The answer is that he's afraid. Afraid that if you knew the full truth of who he is, what he does, you would take your daughter and run." "Should I?" Sophia held my gaze for a long moment. "Only you can answer that, Kara. But I will tell you this. In 30 years, I have never seen Luca look at anyone the way he looks at you and your daughter. Like you've woken something in him he thought was dead." Before I could process her words, the kitchen door swung open and Mia burst in, Rosa trailing behind her with an exasperated but affectionate expression. "Mommy. Mommy. Rosa said I can help make cookies tomorrow if you say it's okay." I scooped my daughter into my arms, breathing in her strawberry scent. "Of course you can, baby." Over Mia's shoulder, I caught Sophia's eye. The older woman gave me a small nod, then returned to her cooking, leaving me to wrestle with questions that had no easy answers. That night, after Mia fell asleep in the enormous bed we shared, I stood by the window and stared out at the moonlit gardens. Somewhere in the city, Marcus was nursing his wounds and planning revenge. Somewhere in this house, Luca Benedetti sat alone with his demons and his empire, and here I stood, caught between two worlds, two men, two possible futures. I thought about what Sophia had said. About fear and protection and the look in Luca's eyes. I thought about Mia's laughter and the safety of these walls and the terrifying prospect of returning to a life of struggle and survival. I thought about Luca's confession, about an 8-year-old boy watching his mother DIY decision crystallize slowly, like ice forming on a winter pond. It wasn't safe. It wasn't smart. Probably wasn't even sane, but when had my life ever been any of those things? Tomorrow I would tell Luca yes. I would accept his offer, enter his world, and pray that I wasn't making the biggest mistake of my life. For Mia, I told myself. I'm doing this for Mia, but as I finally climbed into bed beside my sleeping daughter, I knew that wasn't entirely true. 2 weeks into my new life, I had learned 3 things about Luca Benedetti. First, he was a perfectionist. Every detail of his business operations, from the restaurants he owned legitimately to the meetings he took behind closed doors, was managed with surgical precision. My job was to keep his schedule organized, but I quickly realized that meant anticipating needs he hadn't yet voiced. Second, he was generous to a fault with those under his protection. Rosa received a raise she hadn't asked for when he learned her sister needed surgery. Marco's daughter was accepted into an elite private school with tuition paid in full. And Mia, my beautiful daughter, wanted for nothing. New clothes appeared in her closet. Educational toys materialized in her room. A tutor came 3 times a week to prepare her for kindergarten. Third, and most confusingly, Luca Benedetti went out of his way to avoid being alone with me. We interacted constantly. I spent hours in his study reviewing his calendar, coordinating with his various business managers, fielding calls from people whose names I recognized from newspaper headlines. But the moment the work was done, he retreated. Found reasons to be elsewhere. Built walls I could feel even when I couldn't see them. It was Sophia who finally explained. "He's protecting himself," she said one afternoon while we folded laundry together, a task she insisted on doing herself despite my offers to help with household duties. "And protecting you. From what?" "From himself. From his feelings." She smoothed a pillowcase with practiced hands. "Luca has spent his entire adult life keeping people at arm's length. Caring for someone, truly caring, means giving them power over you. In his world, that kind of vulnerability can be fatal." I thought about that conversation as I sat in Luca's study late one evening, updating his calendar for the following week. Mia was asleep upstairs, exhausted from a day of playing in the garden. The house had settled into its nighttime quiet, and I'd assumed I was alone until Luca appeared in the doorway. "You're working late." I looked up, startled. He'd shed his suit jacket, his sleeves rolled to his elbows, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle. His hair was slightly disheveled, as if he'd been running his hands through it. He looked almost human like this. Approachable. "Just finishing up tomorrow's schedule. You have a breakfast meeting with someone named Antonelli, then a conference call with your lawyers at 10. He moved into the room and I caught a whiff of whiskey. Not drunk, but definitely more relaxed than his usual rigid control. "Antonelli is a snake," he said, settling into the chair across from my desk. His desk, technically, but he'd insisted I use it for my work. "He'll try to charm you when he arrives. Don't be fooled." "I'll keep that in mind." Silence stretched between us, charged with something I couldn't name. Luca's eyes, usually so guarded, roamed over my face with an intensity that made my skin warm. "How are you settling in?" he asked finally. "Is there anything you need?" "Everything is perfect. More than perfect." I closed my laptop, giving him my full attention. "Mia starts school next week. She's so excited she can barely sleep." Something softened in his expression at the mention of my daughter. "She showed me her new backpack today. Pink with unicorns. She insisted on showing everyone. I think even Marco got the full presentation." A ghost of a smile touched Luca's lips. "She's a remarkable child. Resilient like her mother." Compliment caught me off guard. "I'm not resilient. I'm just too stubborn to quit." "That's the same thing." He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, bringing himself closer. "Elena, I need to tell you something." My heart stuttered. Here it was. Catch I'd been waiting for. The moment everything fell apart. "Marcus Webb has been making inquiries." The name hit me like ice water. "What kind of inquiries?" "He's been asking around about you. Trying to find out where you went." Luca's jaw tightened. "One of his associates made contact with someone in my organization, looking for information. He was dealt with appropriately." "Dealt with how?" "You don't need to know the details." I should have been horrified. Should have demanded answers, expressed outrage at the casual violence implied in his words. Instead, I felt only a fierce, primal satisfaction. "He won't stop," I said quietly. Marcus doesn't accept losing. He'll keep looking until he finds me. Let him look. Luca's voice dropped to something low and dangerous. Let him search every corner of this city. He will never get close to you. And when he becomes enough of a nuisance, I will end the threat permanently. You mean kill him? The words hung between us, stark and unflinching. Luca didn't look away. If necessary, yes. I should have been terrified. Should have grabbed my daughter and fled into the night. Instead, I thought about Marcus's fist connecting with my ribs, his boot against my spine, the terror of running through rain-soaked streets with nowhere safe to go. Good, I whispered and watched something shift in Luca's eyes. He rose abruptly, moving to the window with his back to me. His shoulders were tense beneath his shirt, his hands clenched at his sides. You should be afraid of me. His voice was rough. You should be running in the opposite direction. Probably. I stood, drawn toward him despite every warning bell screaming in my head. But I'm not. Why? He turned, and the rawness in his expression stole my breath. I'm not a good man, Elena. I've done things that would haunt your nightmares. I've hurt people, killed people, built an empire on blood and fear. And yet you read bedtime stories to my daughter. You gave shelter to a stranger bleeding on your sidewalk. You protect women you've never met from men who hurt them. I stopped inches away from him, close enough to feel the heat radiating from his body. Maybe you're not a good man by conventional standards, but you're not the monster you want me to believe you are. You don't know what you're saying. I know exactly what I'm saying. I reached up, my fingers hovering near his jaw but not quite touching. I've known real monsters, Luca. I've lived with them, been broken by them, survived them. You're not that. You're something else entirely. His hand caught my wrist, not roughly, but with enough force to stop my movement. His thumb pressed against my pulse point, feeling the rapid flutter of my heartbeat. If I take what I want, he said, his voice barely above a whisper, there's no going back. You become mine, Elena. Completely. And I don't share. I don't let go. The possessiveness in his words should have frightened me. Instead, it ignited something deep in my chest, a hunger I'd thought Marcus had beaten out of me forever. What if I want to be yours? Question hung in the air for one eternal moment. Then Luca's control shattered, his mouth claimed mine with a ferocity that left me breathless. One hand tangled in my hair while the other pressed against the small of my back, pulling me flush against him. I gasped at the contact, and he swallowed the sound, deepening the kiss until I couldn't remember my own name. When we finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against mine. This changes everything, he murmured. I know. There are things I need to tell you. Things about my business, my life. Things that might change how you feel about me. Then tell me. I pulled back enough to meet his eyes. No more secrets. No more walls. He studied my face for a long moment, searching for something. Whatever he found made him release a breath that seemed to come from somewhere deep inside. Tomorrow. I'll tell you everything tomorrow. His thumb traced my cheekbone with impossible gentleness. Tonight, just let me hold you. Let me pretend for one night that I'm the man you deserve. I should have insisted on answers. Should have demanded the truth before falling any deeper into whatever this was between us. Instead, I let him lead me to the couch, let him wrap his arms around me, let myself rest against his chest and listen to the steady rhythm of his heart. For the first time in longer than I could remember, I felt completely safe. Tomorrow would bring revelations and complications. Tomorrow would force me to confront the reality of who Luca Benedetti truly was and what being his meant for my future. But tonight, in the quiet sanctuary of his study, I allowed myself to simply feel, and what I felt, terrifyingly and undeniably, was the beginning of love. I woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the distant sound of Mia's laughter. For a disoriented moment, I couldn't remember where I was. Then the previous night came flooding back. Luca's kiss. His confession. falling asleep in his arms on the leather couch. The couch was empty now, but a cashmere blanket had been tucked around me, and a note rested on the coffee table. Breakfast with Antonelli. We'll talk when I return. L. The single initial shouldn't have made my heart flutter. I was a grown woman with a child, not a teenager with a crush. And yet I pressed the note against my chest like a lovesick fool before folding it carefully and tucking it into my pocket. I found Mia in the kitchen with Rosa, eating pancakes shaped like animals while chattering about her upcoming first day of school. She barely noticed when I kissed the top of her head. Too engrossed in explaining to Rosa why unicorns were better than horses, Sophia appeared with coffee, her knowing eyes taking in my rumpled appearance and the flush I couldn't quite control. Good morning, Kara. Her voice was carefully neutral. You slept well? Yes, thank you. I accepted the coffee, avoiding her gaze. Where is everyone? Mr. Luca left for his meeting an hour ago. Marco went with him. She paused. There was some discussion this morning. About security. The warmth in my chest cooled instantly. What kind of discussion? Perhaps it's best if Mr. Luca explains. Before I could press further, the front door burst open. Raised voices echoed through the marble foyer. Marco's commanding bark, then other voices I didn't recognize, then Luca's voice sharp with authority. Get Dr. Ferraro. Now. I was moving before I consciously decided to, my bare feet slapping against cold marble as I ran toward the commotion. What I saw when I rounded the corner made my blood freeze. Luca stood in the foyer, his white shirt splattered with blood. Marco supported him on one side, another man I didn't recognize on the other. His face was pale, his jaw clenched against what was obviously significant pain. Luca! His name tore from my throat as I rushed toward him. I'm fine. The words came through gritted teeth. It's not as bad as it looks. You've been shot. I reached for him, my hands hovering uselessly. Grazed. The bullet barely touched me. He tried to straighten, winced, and allowed Marco to take more of his weight. Elena, go back to the kitchen. Keep Mia away from this. Like hell I will. I ducked under his other arm, taking some of his weight despite the disparity in our sizes. What happened? Luca exchanged a look with Marco over my head. Some silent communication passed between them. Antonelli, Marco said grimly. The meeting was an ambush. And Antonelli? Won't be setting any more ambushes. Marco's voice held dark satisfaction. Together, we half-carried Luca to the sitting room, lowering him onto a couch that would probably be ruined by bloodstains. Dr. Ferraro arrived within minutes, his medical bag already open as he assessed the wound. Through and through, the doctor pronounced. Missed anything vital. You're lucky. Lucky isn't a word I'd use, Luca muttered, then hissed as the doctor began cleaning the wound. I sat beside him, my hand finding his and squeezing tightly. He looked at me, surprise flickering through the pain in his eyes. You should be keeping Mia away from this. Sophia has her. She thinks we're playing a game. I squeezed his hand again. You scared me. I scared myself. He lifted our joined hands, pressing his lips to my knuckles. This is my life, Elena. Ambushes. Enemies. Blood. Are you sure this is what you want? I thought about running. About taking Mia and disappearing into a safe, boring, ordinary life. Then I looked at the man before me. Wounded but unbroken. Dangerous but tender. Mine. I'm sure, I said and meant it. The days following the ambush blurred together in a haze of worry and whispered conversations. Luca healed faster than any normal person should have, his body apparently as stubborn as his will. Within a week, he was back in his study, conducting meetings and issuing orders as if nothing had happened, but something had changed between us. The walls he'd so carefully constructed had crumbled that night in his study. Now, when he looked at me, there was no more guarded distance. Only a hunger that matched my own, tempered by a tenderness that still surprised me every time I glimpsed it. We hadn't made love yet. Luca insisted on waiting until he was fully healed, claiming he wanted our first time to be perfect rather than hindered by injury. I suspected the truth was more complicated. He was giving me time. Time to understand what I was choosing, what becoming his truly meant. 3 weeks after the ambush, on a crisp December evening, Luca summoned me to his study. I found him standing by the fireplace, the flames casting dancing shadows across his sharp features. He dressed casually for once, dark jeans and a charcoal sweater that made his blue eyes seem impossibly vivid. A glass of whiskey dangled from his fingers. "Close the door." I obeyed, my heart already accelerating. The air in the room felt charged, electric with anticipation. "I promised you the truth." He didn't turn to face me. "About who I am, what I do, the life you're choosing to enter. I know what you are, Luca. You know pieces, rumors, assumptions." He finally turned, and the vulnerability in his expression made my chest ache. "I need you to hear it from me. All of it. And then I need you to decide if you can live with it." I crossed the room and settled into one of the leather chairs by the fire, tucking my legs beneath me. "I'm listening." Luca was quiet for a long moment, gathering his thoughts. When he spoke, his voice was steady but heavy with old pain. "My father was Vittorio Benedetti. He ran the family's operations for 20 years, inheriting from his father before him. Drugs, weapons, protection rackets. The usual empire of blood and money." He took a sip of whiskey. "But his true legacy was cruelty. He believed power came from fear, and he made everyone fear him. Including my mother. Including me. Sophia told me some of it. She told you the ending. Let me tell you the rest." He moved to the chair across from mine, sitting heavily. "My mother, Lucia, was an arranged marriage. A business transaction between families. She was beautiful and kind and completely unprepared for the monster she'd married." His hand tightened around his glass. "The beatings started on their honeymoon. By the time I was born, she'd learned to hide the bruises with makeup and the broken bones with long sleeves. She protected me as best she could, taking the blows meant for me when I made mistakes." "Luca." I reached for him, but he shook his head. "Let me finish. I need to say this." He drew a ragged breath. "When I was 8, my father came home drunk. More drunk than usual. I'd broken a vase earlier that day. Just an accident, a child's clumsiness. But he'd been looking for an excuse." The fire crackled in the silence. I could see him retreating into the memory, his eyes going distant. "He went after my mother first. Called her a failure for raising a clumsy, worthless son. She tried to protect me, put herself between us like she always did. But this time," his voice cracked, "this time he didn't stop." Tears burned my eyes, but I stayed silent. He needed to tell this story, needed me to hear it. I watched him beat her to death. 8 years old, hiding behind a couch, too terrified to move. The sounds she made at the end. I still hear them sometimes when the nightmares come. He drained his whiskey in one long swallow. When it was over, he looked at me. Blood on his hands, his shirt, his face. And he said, "Clean this up. We have guests coming for dinner." Oh God. I called the police instead. Something broke in me that night, broke and reformed into something harder. I told them everything. Every beating I'd witnessed, every scream I'd heard through bedroom walls. I testified at his trial. Helped put him away for life. A bitter smile touched his lips. His family called me a traitor. Said I'd violated the sacred code of silence. They tried to have me killed 3 times before I turned 16. How did you survive? Marco's father, Giuseppe. He'd been loyal to my mother, not my father. He protected me, trained me, helped me understand that the only way to truly be safe was to be powerful. Luca met my eyes. I took over the family business at 21. Killed the men who'd tried to kill me. Built something new from the ashes of my father's cruelty. And now, Now I run an empire that spans the eastern seaboard. Drugs, yes, but only marijuana in states where it's becoming legal. Gambling, mostly online and offshore. Protection for businesses that the police ignore. Money laundering for clients who pay well and ask no questions. He spread his hands. I'm not innocent, Elena. I've ordered men killed. Destroyed rivals who threatened my people. Done things that would earn me multiple life sentences if they could be proven. Confession should have horrified me. Should have sent me running from the room, grabbing my daughter, fleeing into the night. Instead, I saw only the wounded boy behind the powerful man. The child who'd watched his mother die and channeled that trauma into something that kept others safe. Is that everything? Surprise flickered across his face. You're not running. Should I be? Most people would. I rose from my chair, moving to kneel before him. My hands found his, our fingers intertwining. I'm not most people. I held his gaze, letting him see the certainty in my eyes. You told me once that you're not a good man. Maybe that's true by some definitions. But you're the man who saved me and my daughter. The man who reads bedtime stories and makes sure Rosa's sister gets surgery. The man who protects women from monsters because he couldn't protect his mother. Elena, I'm not finished. I squeezed his hands. I've lived with a real monster. I know what cruelty looks like when it has no purpose except to cause pain. You're not that. What you've built, the things you've done, they come from somewhere I can understand. Survival. Protection. Justice that the law refuses to provide. You're romanticizing a criminal. I'm seeing clearly for the first time in years. I released his hands to cup his face, feeling the rasp of stubble against my palms. I choose this. I choose you. All of you, including the parts that scare me. Something broke behind his eyes. The last wall, the final defense he'd held in reserve. I don't deserve you, he whispered. Let me decide what you deserve. When he kissed me this time, it was different. Not the desperate claiming of before, but something deeper. Promise. A surrender. He pulled back just enough to rest his forehead against mine. Stay with me tonight. Not for Mia, not for safety. Just for us. Yes. Later, tangled in silk sheets in his bedroom, I traced the scar on his shoulder where Antonelli's bullet had grazed him. His skin was warm beneath my fingers, his breathing slow and content. There's something else I need to tell you. His voice rumbled against my ear. About Marcus. I tensed despite myself. What about him? My people found his supplier. He's been dealing drugs, using the money to fund his search for you. Luca's arm tightened around me. He's getting desperate. Asking questions in dangerous places, making promises he can't keep. What does that mean? Means he's becoming a liability to people far more dangerous than himself. One way or another, the problem will resolve soon. I should have felt something. Fear, perhaps, or guilt. Instead, I felt only relief. I don't want to know the details, I said quietly. I just want to know that Mia and I are safe. You are. I swear it on my mother's grave. Silence settled over us, comfortable and warm. Outside, snow had begun to fall, the first of the season, coating the grounds in pristine white. Mia's Christmas list is getting longer, I murmured drowsily. She wants a puppy. Luca's chest vibrated with quiet laughter. Then she'll have a puppy. You can't just give her everything she asks for. Watch me. I smiled against his skin, letting the warmth of his body and the steadiness of his heartbeat lull me toward sleep. Tomorrow would bring new challenges. Marcus was still out there. Luca's world was still dangerous, but tonight, wrapped in the arms of a man who'd shown me his darkest secrets and found acceptance instead of rejection, I felt something I'd thought lost forever. Hope. Christmas morning dawned bright and cold. Mia's shriek of delight when she discovered the golden retriever puppy waiting beneath the tree echoed through the mansion, bringing smiles to faces that had seen too much darkness. I watched from the doorway as Luca helped my daughter name her new companion, his patience infinite as she cycled through increasingly ridiculous options before settling on Princess Sparkle. "You're spoiling her," I said later, once Mia had exhausted herself playing with the puppy and fallen asleep on the couch. "Absolutely." Luca pulled me into his arms, pressing a kiss to my temple. "I plan to spoil you both for the rest of my life." The rest of my life. The words should have terrified me. Instead, they felt like a promise I desperately wanted him to keep. "I have something for you." He reached into his pocket, producing a small velvet box. My heart stopped. "Luca, it's not what you think." "Not yet." He opened the box to reveal a delicate gold key on a chain. "This is the key to everything. My home, my heart, my life. I'm giving it to you because I want you to know that you're not a guest here anymore. You're not an employee or a charity case. You're mine, and this is your home for as long as you want it." Tears blurred my vision as he fastened the chain around my neck. The key settled against my chest, warm from his hand. "I love you," I whispered. The first time I'd said the words aloud, his eyes blazed with an emotion so intense it stole my breath. "I love you, Elena. You and Mia both. More than I thought I was capable of loving anything." When he kissed me, with the snow falling outside and my daughter sleeping peacefully nearby and a ridiculous puppy snoring at our feet, I finally understood what it meant to come home, not to a place but to a person, not to safety but to love. New Year's Eve arrived with a bitter cold that turned the mansion's grounds into a glittering wonderland of ice and snow. Inside, warmth radiated from every fireplace, and the staff had decorated with tasteful elegance that spoke of old money and older traditions. I stood before the mirror in the bedroom I now shared with Luca, adjusting the emerald green gown he'd insisted on buying for tonight's party. The silk-hugged curves that had returned over the past months of proper meals and peaceful sleep. My hair fell in soft waves around shoulders that no longer bore the marks of violence. The woman staring back at me was almost unrecognizable from the broken creature who'd collapsed in the rain outside Benedetti's restaurant 3 months ago. Beautiful. Luca's reflection appeared behind mine, his hands settling on my waist. He wore a black tuxedo that made him look like something out of a classic film, dangerous and devastatingly handsome. "You're biased." "Absolutely." He pressed a kiss to my bare shoulder. "But also correct." I turned in his arms, smoothing the lapels of his jacket. "Are you sure about tonight? Having me at your side publicly?" "People will talk. Let them." His eyes held mine with fierce certainty. "I'm done hiding what you mean to me. Tonight, everyone who matters will know that you're under my protection. That hurting you means war." A shiver ran through me that had nothing to do with cold. "That's very medieval of you. I'm a traditional man." Mia burst through the door before I could respond, Princess Sparkle bounding at her heels. My daughter wore a red velvet dress with a full skirt that she'd already twirled in approximately 700 times since putting it on. "Mommy." "Mr. Luca." "Rosa says the guests are arriving and there's going to be fireworks at midnight, and can Princess Sparkle come to the party please, please, please?" Luca crouched to her level, his expression softening in the way it only did for my daughter. "Princess Sparkle needs her beauty sleep, Piccola. But I promise you can watch the fireworks from the balcony with her." "Okay." Mia threw her arms around his neck in the easy affection she'd developed over the past months. "I love you, Mr. Luca." I watched his face as he held my daughter, saw the emotion he couldn't quite hide. "I love you too, Piccola. Now go find Rosa. She has a special job for you." Mia scampered off with the puppy in tow, leaving a sudden silence in her wake. "She called me." Luca's voice was rough. "I know." I cupped his face in my hands. "She means it. You've become her world, Luca. Both of us have." He pulled me close, burying his face in my hair. For a long moment, we simply held each other, letting the magnitude of what we'd built together settle around us like a warm blanket. Then Marco's voice crackled through the intercom. Boss, we have a situation at the front gate. Luca's body tensed instantly, the tender lover transforming into the dangerous man who commanded an empire. What kind of situation? Marcus Webb. He's here. Demanding to see Elena. The name hit me like a bucket of ice water. My fingers dug into Luca's arms as panic clawed at my chest. How did he find me? It doesn't matter. Luca's voice was cold steel. He won't leave this property alive. Wait. I grabbed his arm as he moved toward the door. Let me talk to him. Absolutely not. Luca, please. I need to face him. I need to look him in the eye and show him that he doesn't control me anymore. I held his gaze, willing him to understand. I've spent months hiding, running, being afraid. If I don't confront this now, I'll be looking over my shoulder forever. The muscle in his jaw worked as he warred with himself. I could see the protective instinct fighting against his respect for my autonomy. You'll have 5 minutes, he finally said. Marco and I will be 10 feet away. If he makes a single move toward you, I end him. No discussion. Thank you. Marcus looked terrible. The man who'd once prided himself on his appearance stood at the gate in wrinkled clothes, his face gaunt and unshaven. Dark circles carved hollows beneath eyes that darted nervously between the armed men surrounding him. He wasn't the monster I remembered. He was just a pathetic, broken man who'd lost his power over me. Elena. His voice cracked on my name. Baby, I've been looking everywhere for you. I stopped 6 feet away, close enough to see the desperation in his eyes, far enough to feel safe with Luca's solid presence behind me. I know. I also know you've been dealing drugs to fund your search, making promises to dangerous people. I kept my voice steady. It's over, Marcus. It's not over. It'll never be over. He lunged forward, only to be immediately restrained by 2 of Marco's men. You're mine, Elena. You and that brat of yours. You think this rich bastard actually cares about you? You're just a toy to him. Something pretty to play with until he gets bored. I felt Luca move behind me, murder in every line of his body. I held up a hand to stop him. You're wrong. I stepped closer to Marcus, close enough to see the veins bulging in his temples. What Luca and I have isn't anything you could understand, because it's built on respect and protection and genuine care. Things you've never been capable of. I loved you, Marcus snarled. No. You wanted to own me. There's a difference. I held his gaze without flinching. I used to be so afraid of you. Terrified of what you might do if I ever got away. But look at you now. Pathetic. Powerless. Begging at the gates of a man who could destroy you with a single phone call. Marcus's face contorted with rage. You ungrateful bitch. After everything I did for you, you beat me. My voice rose, carrying across the frozen grounds. You threatened my daughter. You made me feel worthless and small and afraid to exist. That's what you did for me, Marcus. And I will never, ever let you or anyone else do that to me again. I turned my back on him, the ultimate dismissal, and walked toward Luca. Behind me, I heard Marcus screaming, heard the sounds of a scuffle as Marco's men subdued him. Luca caught me in his arms, his hand cradling the back of my head as I pressed my face against his chest. I'm proud of you, he murmured against my hair. What happens to him now? Luca was quiet for a moment. What do you want to happen? I thought about it. About Marcus rotting in a cell somewhere. About Marcus disappearing entirely. About the complicated web of justice and vengeance and closure. I want him gone from our lives forever, I said finally. But I don't want his blood on your hands. Not for me. There are other ways. Luca pulled back enough to meet my eyes. His suppliers are very unhappy with his recent activities. A few words in the right ears and Marcus Webb becomes someone else's problem. Someone far away from here. And he'll never come back? Never. I nodded. a weight lifting from my shoulders that I'd carried for so long I'd forgotten what it felt like to breathe without it. Then do it. And let's go celebrate New Year's Eve. The party was everything I'd expected and nothing I was prepared for. Crystal chandeliers cast rainbow light across a ballroom filled with people whose names I recognized from newspapers and society pages. Politicians, business leaders, celebrities, all gathered in Luca Benedetti's home to ring in the new year, and I stood at his side, his hand warm at the small of my back, as he introduced me to each of them. My partner, he called me. Not girlfriend, not assistant. Partner, the word carried weight in his world. I saw it in the widening eyes of men who'd known Luca for decades. In the calculating assessments of women who'd once hoped to claim this position themselves. By the time midnight approached, my feet ached and my face hurt from smiling, but my heart had never felt so full. We found Mia on the balcony with Rosa, Princess Sparkle curled in her lap, all three of them bundled in blankets against the cold. The puppy had grown in the months since Christmas, but still fit perfectly in my daughter's arms. Mommy, is it almost time? Almost, baby. I settled onto the cushioned bench beside her, pulling her close. Luca sat on her other side, and Mia immediately leaned against him, so natural and trusting that it made my eyes sting. Can we count down together? She asked. Of course, Piccola. Luca's voice was soft with affection. That's what families do. The word hung in the cold air, shimmering with meaning. Family, the crowd inside began chanting. 10. 9. I looked at Luca over my daughter's head, found him already watching me with those impossibly blue eyes. 7. 6. 5. Marry me, he said quietly, the words almost lost beneath the counting. 4. 3. My heart stopped. What? 2. Marry me, Elena. Be my wife. Let me be Mia's father. Build a life with me. 1. Fireworks exploded across the sky, painting the night in brilliant color. Mia shrieked with delight, clapping her hands as Princess Sparkle barked at the lights, and I answered with the only word that mattered. Yes. Luca's kiss tasted like champagne and promises. Like the future I'd never dared to imagine and the home I'd finally found. When we broke apart, Mia was staring at us with wide eyes. Does this mean Mr. Luca is going to be my daddy? I looked at the man who'd saved us, loved us, given us everything. Yes, baby. It does. Yay. She launched herself at Luca, nearly knocking him off the bench. I always wanted a daddy. Can I call you Daddy Luca? Rosa says families have matching names, so do I get to be Mia Benedetti? Can Princess Sparkle be in the wedding? Luca caught my eye over our daughter's head and we both burst out laughing. The sound felt like freedom, like joy, like everything I'd ever wanted and never believed I could have. 6 months later, on a perfect June afternoon, I walked down an aisle strewn with rose petals toward the man who'd carried me out of the rain and into a new life. Mia preceded me as flower girl, Princess Sparkle trotting beside her with a ribbon around her neck. Sophia cried in the front row. Marco stood at Luca's side, looking almost human in his smile, and Luca, my Luca, watched me approach with eyes that held no more walls, no more shadows. Only love. You're late, he murmured as I reached him. I needed an extra minute to believe this was real. He took my hands, his thumbs tracing circles on my skin. It's real. I promise you, Elena. Every day for the rest of our lives, I will make this real. The ceremony passed in a blur of vows and rings and tears. When he kissed me, our guests erupted in applause, but I barely heard them. All I could hear was the steady beat of his heart against mine. All I could feel was the warmth of coming home. That night, after the guests had departed and Mia had fallen asleep clutching her flower girl basket, I stood on the balcony where we'd gotten engaged and watched the moon rise over the gardens. Luca's arms wrapped around me from behind, pulling me against his chest. Any regrets, Mrs. Benedetti? The name sent a thrill through me that I suspected would never fade. None. You? Only that I didn't find you sooner. He pressed a kiss to my temple. Think of all the time we wasted. We're here now. That's what matters. Silence settled over us, comfortable and complete. In the distance, I could hear the fountain where Mia loved to watch the fish. Somewhere inside, Princess Sparkle was probably stealing food from the kitchen. This was my life now. Complicated and dangerous and more beautiful than anything I dared to dream. I fainted in the rain, I said softly. Outside a restaurant I could never afford to eat in. And you carried me inside and changed everything. You changed everything, Luca corrected. I was just existing before you, going through the motions of life without actually living. His arms tightened around me. You woke me up, Elena. You and Mia. You made me remember what it felt like to have something worth protecting. I turned in his arms, cupping his face in my hands the way I had that first night in his study. I love you, Luca Benedetti. I love you, Elena Benedetti. He smiled, and it reached his eyes, transforming his face with a joy I'd helped put there. Now, come to bed. It's been a very long day, and I have plans for my wife. I laughed as he swept me into his arms, carrying me through the French doors exactly as he carried me that rainy night months ago, but this time I wasn't broken and bleeding and afraid. This time I was home. Thank you so much for joining me for this story. If you enjoyed,